Hi, we're here today at Couple Student Media. My name is Emma Cummins, and I'm the editorial page editor.
My name is Brianna Thomas, and I'm a staff writer.
My name is Meha Srivastava, and I'm a staff writer too.
Okay, so today we are going to talk about Donald Trump because everybody knows about him, and we're also going to talk about just the general election, whether or not it's going to be Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. But we also want to start it off with the comments Donald Trump made yesterday about abortion. Meha, would you give us a little more information about that?
So, he said it really, in just 5 words, but what he said was there has to be some form of punishment for women who do abortion for their children. So, we're just going to discuss what the implications of that would be.
Yeah, so I think this is on par with Donald Trump's strategy, is that he gives us these outlandish statements that are incredibly general and very open to interpretation, especially with this. And I think even some of the people who had previously supported him for being kind of, gutsy with the things that he's saying, like Ann Coulter, are even backing down from what he said about abortion, because there's so many legal ramifications to punishing women who have had abortions, whether or not they're legal or illegal, and he didn't specify whether or not women would be punished if they had abortions when it was legal and then it was outlawed, or whether or not just illegal abortion would be a punishable offense. And I think it's definitely an issue that people are supporting someone who rarely gives specifics and I don't think has any specifics.
Yeah, and I think you described it as gutsy. And to me, gutsy for him in his campaign is really just uneducated. Because I think he's not making any direct claims that for people who are looking for specific things in a candidate, nothing they can relate with. So I think a lot of his campaign, his comments, whether they're about abortion, immigration, or women's rights, I think they're just contributing to this major uncertainty that pollutes the campaign now, and it just leaves a lot of our younger generation feeling super uncertain, and it feels like we have to cling to, we either have to be super liberal or we either have to be super conservative. And if we're super liberal, that's too much for our parents, or if we're conservative, we're not going to fit in. So it's kind of a hard thing.
Definitely. And I think just going to the general election, it looks like it's most likely going to be a Hillary versus Donald Trump race. Obviously that might change, but if we were just going to look at that, I think that's a really good point to make, that Hillary and Donald Trump are so radically opposed a little bit that it's going to be, I think a lot of teenagers are really frustrated with the fact that there's no middle ground, or there's no really candidate who's honest, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's true. You have to either be on one extreme stand. So even for Bernie Sanders, so many people, our peers, I hear them talking about how Bernie Sanders, what he says is so great, and it's going to be so great for them in the future and for our economy. But if you look at, if you hear what he's saying, it's not actually going to be viable. It's not going to be implemented practically, because he says that college is going to be free for everyone. How is he going to do that? That's not really possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can, that's what you said. We can criticize Donald Trump for having his strategy, but we can also not criticize, but we can observe Bernie's strategy, because we know his stance is very liberal, but the not promises, but the things he sets, his goals are very, it's easier for us to say, agree with them, because we're all, a lot of teens are usually coming on the more liberal side, but really if you analyze his, a lot of his goals and his plans for the future, we analyze Donald Trump's, we see a lot of similarities in that they're both extremes, and we are not going to see a certainty that it's actually going to happen.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting to see that both Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders are kind of these radical opposites, and yet Hillary Clinton is still beating Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
You would think that both Bernie and, Donald Trump more so, but they're both kind of reactionary candidates to establishments or groups of people who have felt disaffected about politics in general. And Donald Trump is kind of this reactionary politician, and Bernie Sanders isn't reactionary, but he is, he's running on kind of a socialist campaign a little bit, and he's doing well. And it's kind of interesting to see that Donald Trump has managed to rile up more than Bernie Sanders has, and yet Donald Trump is, misogynistic, and he's got a campaign manager who's assaulting women, and he's definitely, much less much less morally compelled as I think Bernie is a little bit, if we're just going in generals. But
yeah, it's really interesting to see that because, I mean, if you listen to both of them, they're really saying ideal stuff that people want to hear. But Trump is really more successful with that, and even though he's saying such like insane things, people generally are being roused by what he's saying. And for example, once he said that even if I shoot someone, I'm not going to lose any voters. But yesterday with what he said, with the abortion stance, actually, like, neither sides of both pro-choice and pro-life didn't really support him.
Yeah.
And so that's not really going to get him anything.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of people who identify themselves as liberal or conservative, I think pro-choice, there's no one definition. So it's kind of like, for me, like, if I say I'm pro-choice, which I'm not going to make a statement about that, but if I would say that, I think it would be on the exceptions of like rape or incest or like if it's going to save the mother's life. So I think again I find it reasonable that people are drawn to either Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump because Hillary is really keeping that middle ground. And so with the younger generation, it's almost annoying because we are not seeing either something very conservative or something liberal where we can catch on to and we can agree, we know what's happening there. But for Hillary, it's just just in the blue.
Yeah, and I think for just voters in general, Hillary Clinton has been around for a really, really long time, and it seems like she's just so inauthentic about everything she believes in, and it feels like even though Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton agree on a lot, Bernie Sanders is doing better just because I think Hillary just doesn't seem passionate about the stuff that she's running for, and she just seems like she's appealing. I mean, obviously every politician is appealing to an audience, but it's just so much more plastic and obtuse than Hillary. I mean, Hillary is more obtuse than Bernie Sanders is, even though, and I think, people who are teenagers who are going to be voting, people who are 18, have kind of a tough decision with Hillary and Donald Trump, just because they're both so controversial.
Yeah.
There's not one more. I mean, I know a lot of people kind of side with Hillary just because she's a liberal, but I know a lot of liberals who are so incredibly frustrated that this is the choice they have to make.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of them are just choosing not to make that decision.